because of how the Haslam's have set up the contracts of Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, I think it's pretty obvious that they are tied to each other by the nature of that situation. Yes. But what I find interesting is in previous years, I would have said that I thought Kevin Stefanski was more safe, quote unquote, than Andrew Berry. I would have thought that Kevin Stefanski was viewed more favorably in the organization than Andrew Berry. And I do still think maybe right now that's probably true. But here's the thing.
I don't think one's viewed more favorably than the other in the organization.
Okay, yes, within the organization, you're right. But within the fan base, I think there's been there's a lot of people.
That's different. I mean, they're
for sure. But I do think Andrew Berry gets criticized a lot for his draft picks and the fact that he hasn't been able to hit on a lot of guys. And I think Kevin Stefanski, there's a little more grace there where they're like, well, hey, we've seen him do it with certain players, certain teams. We've seen him make the playoffs. He's taken this team to places it's never been before. They got to go back to his offense and see what he can do. I just think there's been a more favorable standpoint or viewpoint on Stefanski than there maybe has Andrew Berry. But what I think is interesting is this year, while I would have said last year, maybe it was Stefanski who was safe and Berry who's on a hotter seat because his drafts just haven't been there. And he's the guy who's going to forever be associated with the worst trade in NFL history with the Deshaun Watson situation. He has to own that. I would have said probably this time last year, Stefanski's safe and Andrew Berry's maybe on a hotter seat. But I'm kind of wondering, as we get ready for 2025, I think this year's draft class for Andrew Berry has a chance to be like his Sistine Chapel, if you will. I do.
You're stealing my bit because I've been saying this for a few weeks. This rookie class has the potential to be more impactful than the 2028 class.
Yeah.
Because they didn't just, well, first of all, he has the picks. He had the picks this year. That's the first part, right? He actually had picks to use. But also, too, these guys are going to start. Mason Graham's going to start at defensive tackle. Right?
Sean Judkins is going to start.
Yep. You're going to see a lot of Sampson as well, and Sampson's going to get used in the passing game.
Carson Schwesinger's probably going to be a starter.
He's your JOK replacement.
Right.
Okay. Fannin, you're going to see a lot of him in those two tight end sets.
Especially with no wide receivers. They have no wide
David
receivers.
Njoku. Yeah, absolutely. This rookie class, it is setting up to be potentially extremely impactful. Now, on paper, it looks fantastic. It looks like Andrew Berry just absolutely slayed in the draft.
Yeah.
But if I had $1 for every time the Cleveland Browns look good on paper, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you this morning. Darryl be owning his own private island somewhere and enjoying life on a beach. For sure.
And so here's the thing. I think you're right with this take. And I've heard you mention this before, which is where I think took this in a different direction and where I want to go here. Because I think there's a really good chance this is like Andrew Berry's best draft class. And that we walk away from this starting to change our opinions about okay, can he draft and develop talent? If three guys, at least from this class, hit and become foundational pieces for the team, Mason Graham should be one. He better be one because you picked him fit number 5 overall.
Right.
If Quinshawn becomes the star running back, if Schlesinger is a really solid linebacker, if Fannin becomes your tight end of the future, you could have 3 or 4 guys here that you feel really good about, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, we've changed the trajectory of this team. And if that happens, I almost wonder now if the conversation around hot seat flips, because you could have a really bad season still. This team could be really bad. And we start to say, maybe Kevin Stefanski's not the right guy for this job. Maybe what he wants to do isn't getting through. Maybe he loses the locker room. But Andrew Berry finally got some draft picks right. Andrew Berry finally got some guys here that you feel like you can build around. And so I almost wonder if I understand they're tied together. And so this is probably a moot point anyway in terms of how Jimmy Haslam's going to go about these things, because he's already signaled to you he's keeping these guys together. He wants to give them a chance to sort of see this thing through post Deshaun Watson trade.
Right.
But I do wonder if we could get to the end of the season, and if they stink, but we see these players that Andrew Berry drafted really standing out and giving you hope for the future, if they maybe just say, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to change the voice in the locker room, but Andrew Berry, you can stay because we think that you have started to build something and gotten this team in the right place, and we're going to give you a chance to draft the quarterback, which is ultimately the thing that he's going to be judged by the most, is what quarterback he gets and develops into a potential franchise guy.
Well, he's drafted quarterbacks. He drafted DTR. Now he's drafted Dylan Gabriel. and Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, for me, it's not about if when it comes to these rookies. Okay. It's about they better be good. They better be impactful players, or else Andrew Berry's not going to be here.
Yeah.
Like that for me, I'm not even looking at through the lens, Spencer, of, well, if they do this or this and this, then the Browns can be this, that, whatever. No, it's they better be good. They better be impactful. Now, I'm not saying they got to be future Hall of Famers or Pro Bowlers, but they better be significant contributors, because if they're not, A, Andrew Berry is going to be unemployed, and B, this team isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
So, this isn't like a couple of years ago. The reason I had this conversation with someone last night that I was talking to. Yes, the results of the Deshaun Watson trade were a complete unmitigated train wreck. Okay, but the premise behind the trade is absolutely right. They felt they were a quarterback away. Okay. That's what they felt like. They were a quarterback away. So they went all in, and they went all in with Deshaun Watson. It's not worked out. So you understand the premise of the thought, but like when you're talking about this draft class, yeah, they have to hit.
Yeah.
Jed Wills was a miss.
Right.
I'm going to say Greg Newsome was a hit because he is a contributor. Now, you judge the hits on, do you get the second contract? Greg Newsome's a good football player. I don't think Greg Newsome, if he doesn't get a second contract from the Browns, it's not because he's not.
It's only two guys that have gotten the second contract. It's JOK and it's Grant Delpit.
I understand. I get it, but I'm just saying, like, if you, like we were talking earlier about Darius Garland, if they trade Darius Garland, it's not a reflection on Darius Garland as a basketball player. He's still very, very good. It's about fit. Yeah. And I feel the same way about Greg Newsome. He's a very good player. They just may not have the fit from either a salary cap standpoint, a roster building standpoint, whatever. But that doesn't mean that Andrew Berry missed the pick. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure.
So, and then the 3 years where they were without picks, okay, it's really hard to like rail on Andrew Berry because he missed 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks.
True.
Okay.
But
you're judged
the
on
guy
your 1st
that
and 2nd
he
round
idolizes,
picks.
the franchise that he comes from, the Eagles, they hit on 3rd round picks. And he also, like, a couple of those years, they had 2nd round picks that they decided not to use, or they traded back, or they got out of the 2nd round and went to the 3rd round. And so they were stacking the odds against themselves. Right. And when you do that to yourself, like, you are going to be judged by those picks ultimately, because it's like, hey, yeah, you're not going to have as good of players to choose from when you're picking in the 2nd and 3rd round or beyond, but you're also banking on, we think we can do this. And he hasn't been able to identify the diamonds in the rough in those rounds to sort of build and supplement the roster. So, but again, back to my original point, I just wonder if, like you said, it has to happen. I agree. It has to happen that at least 3 players in this class.
Mason Graham has to be a hit.
For sure.
Quinshon Judkins has to be a hit.
Yeah.
Schlesinger, you know what?
I think Schlesinger does kind of have to be a hit, though, because he was the first pick of the 2nd round. Like, there was still a number of good players on the board.
And he's probably the replacement for JOK.
Yeah. And so,
I mean that with all due respect. Like, I know JOK is out this year, and we'll see about going forward.
Right.
But, like, let's use a little common sense here.
For sure.
And, I don't think they'd make that pick if they're absolutely confident that JOK is in the fold in 2026. Okay.
But if that happens, if these guys hit the way we're talking about, does that mean that there's a world where Andrew Berry, you get to the end of the season, you're like, all right, well, he finally got you some guys that you feel like you can build around. Let's see what he can do next year, even potentially drafting a quarterback in the 1st round and making that a high priority. And maybe Kevin Stefanski isn't here if this is a 4 or 5 win team again. Or do you think they would both still be together at that point?
They're joined at the hip. And here's the thing. So let's go by your premise, right? Let's say this class hits. They do this year. Now, they might not win a lot of games, but Mason Graham, you see that he's got future Pro Bowl, All-Pro potential, right? Schlesinger, it looks like he can be a starting caliber linebacker. You get Quinshon Judkins. He looks like he's a future All-Pro running back. And then, I don't know, Fannin or another member of this class, right? Let's say you get 3 or 4 of these guys that look like he absolutely nailed the pick. Barry's not going anywhere. And I'm going to tell you right now, Kevin Stefanski's not going to go anywhere either. Because it's going to be, hey, we got some young pieces finally in here to supplement the veterans, and let's see how this thing develops.
Yeah.
I think the leash for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry goes through 2026. Now, the only way I think that potential change could come after this season is if the building falls apart.
Yeah, that's always the thing. Stefanski loses the locker room, and guys, and listen, like,
and Stefanski and Barry stop working well together, because when you look at when the Haslams made changes, and look, over the years prior to this particular regime, it was just it was a turnstile out there between coaches and GMs and executives and all that. The reality is, one of the premises behind, or the impetuses, I should say, behind those changes was the fact that the coach and the GM did not work together. Stefanski and Barry work well together. You've not heard one story, locally or nationally, about their conflicts. Listen, there have been conflicts between them. Their conflicts have never, ever become public.
Yeah, they've stayed in-house. And I will say, like, all this is part of the reason why, you bring up the losing locker room thing. That is the biggest thing that could change. And that's why I think the quarterback competition is really important, because if Kevin Stefanski picks the wrong guy, he can't fool this locker room. Like, he can't tell them this is the guy that gives us the best chance to win, like he tried to do with Deshaun last year. They're going to know what they see in training camp, who they think is the best quarterback. And so he's going to have to pick the right guy when this is all said and done, when training camp wraps.